Mr Hood, I understand that this is the last time we're going to see you.
Senator, yes, after appearing in front of this committee for 14 years, since 2007, I humbly regret that I won't be appearing again.
Oh, well,
Stop smiling.
So, yes, exactly, all the smiles. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
I have got one, Senator. What I'd like to do, if it's all right with the committee, is I have a page and a half, but in terms of actually reading it out, I've got a truncated version that's around about a page, so if you're happy with that, I'd proceed with that.
What a good idea. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
So, Senators, in the interest of time, I'm happy to table the full brief and read this truncated version. In summary, the full brief states that I first appeared in front of this committee in October 2007, and I'll be retiring as Chief Commissioner of the ATSB on the 30th of June this year. My 41-year professional career has included almost a decade of service in the Royal Australian Air Force and then a number of operational and leadership roles within Air Services Australia and in CASA. I have always endeavoured to make a positive contribution towards keeping Australia and Australians safe. Leading the ATSB for the past 5 years has been a humbling experience, and I'm grateful to the Australian Government for entrusting me with this privileged position. Every one of the ATSB's 100 staff or so comes to work to make a difference to the safety of all Australians. In my time as Chief Commissioner and CEO of the ATSB, we have concluded and published more than 500 final investigation reports, which have identified numerous safety issues which led to many safety actions that have improved the aviation, rail and marine transport industries across Australia and internationally. If I may, I'd like to touch briefly on our role of dealing with the families and friends of those who have lost their lives in transport accidents. I've met with many next of kin of those who've lost their lives in the most tragic of circumstances, and I'd like to assure them and this committee of our continuing determined commitment to conduct transport safety investigations into those accidents of the highest quality to best minimise the chance of similar accidents occurring in the future. Today, the ATSB currently has 89 active investigations, and we're continuing to progress, including those into a number of significant transport safety accidents that occurred in 2020 and more recently in 2021. These include the C-130 Hercules large air tanker, which collided with terrain at Peak View near Cooma on the 23rd of January 2020, with the loss of life of 3 American aircrew on board while conducting aerial firefighting operations in support of Australia. The mid-air collision between 2 twin-engine training aircraft near Mangalore, Victoria on the 19th of February 2020, in which the instructor and trainee pilots on both aircraft were killed. The derailment of the XPT passenger train near Wallan, Victoria, just a day later on the 20th of February, in which the train driver and assisting qualified worker were fatally injured. The collision with terrain of a Cessna 404 charter aircraft on approach to land at Lockhart River, Queensland, on the 11th of March 2020, in which the pilot and 4 passengers on board lost their lives, and the fire on board the MPV Everest multi-role vessel while on charter to the Australian Antarctic Division in the Southern Ocean on the 5th of April this year. On board was a crew of 37 and 72 expedition staff, but fortunately there were no injuries. I'd also like to acknowledge the ATSB Commissioners, Chris Manning, Gary Prosser and Catherine Scott, for their professional expertise in aviation, maritime and rail, for providing comprehensive expertise in the governance of the ATSB. Finally, I'm so very proud of our staff at the ATSB who have, time and time again, proven themselves resilient and adaptable during this period of uncertainty. Like all Australians, ATSB staff across the nation have had to adapt to changing circumstances during the pandemic. At a professional level, they've remained committed to their work, whether this be from the office, working from home, or with the appropriate risk assessments deploying to transport accident sites across state borders throughout Australia. So I'd just like to thank you, Senators, and as always, we're pleased to answer any questions that you may have for the ATSB.
Thank you, Mr Hood. We're going to hear from Senator Sterle.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Hood, no wonder you can't wipe the smile off your face.
Thank you, Mr.
And it seems like only yesterday we were first kicking off our careers in this area, so I do want to wish you all the very best. Firstly, Mr Hood, there is a belief from quite a few people that the ATSB should be investigating truck accidents as well, and I'm one of those supporters of that. but of course that would require a quadrupling of your staff and a quadrupling of the budget. Sadly, that we do lose over 50 truck drivers a year, and this nation seems to just brush it off as a motor vehicle accident, and shouldn't be further from the truth. Anyway, on saying that, the ATSB has been on a journey of cultural change under your leadership. Can you outline for the committee the processes you adopted to achieve that change and what you would regard as the successes and highlights of that process?
So, Senator, thanks very much for the question, and I had no grey hairs before I started this position. It's been an absolute privilege, as I said. I think when I first started at the ATSB, I set about having a look at the skills of the staff that are required to produce quality transport safety investigations. So we conducted a skills mapping exercise, a competency mapping exercise, and then we worked with Randstad to put some cognitive tests around those people that we recruit for the ATSB. So traditionally we'd just taken people straight out of industry with very few tests, if you like, for how we were going to employ them. We've also signed a partnership agreement with the RMIT University. RMIT University now trains all of Australia's transport safety investigators for the ATSB, but also for industry. So we're on our third graduate certificate in transport safety investigation run by the RMIT University, and the ATSB's put all of our staff to gain that qualification. Later this year we'll be delivering the first, in conjunction with RMIT, graduate diploma in transport safety investigation, and then pathways to masters. Thank you to the Australian Government. We also arrested the decline in numbers. So 10 years ago we had around about 135 employees in the organisation, and then small agencies were subject to the efficiency dividend, so we lost around about 3 employees a year, 135, 132, 129, and thanks to the intervention by the Minister at the time, we were able to take us back up from around about 93 to 110, and we've been pretty stable at that for the last few years. We've increased the number of women in the organisation and also improved diversity in other areas, and we've improved our timeliness, our key performance indicators. We've changed our management practices, so we've had basically 5 years of transformation. This last 12 months we've renewed all of our IT systems, so that includes the finance system, the EDRMS, the web content management system, the core enterprise system that we use for ATSB investigations, and we've also renewed our property portfolio with new offices in Perth and Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney and in Canberra. So yes, I'm very proud of the agency, where we've come, and with regards to remarks about heavy vehicles, we've also looked more strategically. We have a vision now, and we've also done some preliminary work. So should a policy decision be made that the ATSB step into the investigation of heavy vehicle accidents, then we have an outline of how we might go about that.
Oh, that's great news. As much as we'd like you to have nothing to do, but that is good news. So, okay, Mr. Hood, thank you. So did the ATSB allow for working from home during the pandemic this year? I know you touched on it.
So in March, Senator, during the height, I suppose, of the commencement of the pandemic, we met with our staff and we took a decision that the staff would have the option to work from home or work from the office. Everybody had their own individual circumstances, and I took the view that the management of workplace health and safety is a joint responsibility between the organisation and the individual. So around about 90% of the staff in March elected to work from home. 90%? 90%, and 10% from the office, myself including. But one of the first agencies to reassess the situation in August, the ATSB decided that the risk was appropriately low, and we were continuing to deploy during this period to all sorts of accident sites throughout the country, across state borders with the appropriate permissions anyway, and we took the decision that the ATSB could safely return to work in the majority of locations throughout Australia, Melbourne being the exception, and we decided that we would permit the staff to have 2 days at home during the week, subject to the manager's approval and subject to the work that they were doing at the time, and that's continued as a trial for the remainder of this year. So we have a requirement that people must be in the office 3 days, and the option of working from home for 2 days subject to their manager's concurrence.
Okay, and how was productivity and morale during the COVID period when the worst was here and
So-
subsequently now?
Yeah, thank you. My view is that I'll start with productivity. It's increased. We can demonstrate that through the reports published during the COVID pandemic period. As it relates to morale, I can also demonstrate through the APSC staff satisfaction survey that we've improved around about 18% on most areas within that survey.
18%?
18%.
Wow. So did working from home create any challenges for the operations?
So, Senator, the
organisation?
way in which the ATSB works is that all of our technical infrastructure, so we use Surface Pros, we contract with Telstra because that provides us with the greatest coverage throughout the country, and also we use the Apple iPhone. And so our workforce is uniquely set up to work remotely from anywhere at any time, anywhere on an accident site.
Yeah.
So in terms of, we had a WH&S checklist staff were required to complete to work from home. And the transition was remarkably easy. We provided them with a larger screen on loan to the home premises if they wanted one or they needed one. But apart from that, our staff are pretty much set up to work from anywhere in any case.
Okay. And reflecting on your successful leadership career, particularly in CASA, Air Services and now ATSB, what in your view are the big cultural and public policy challenges that need to be addressed?
The cultural challenges, and obviously I've been reflecting on the Air Services Australia Elizabeth Broderick review. You know, I was the Executive General Manager Air Traffic Control for 4 years immediately prior to this position, and I'll have to say that the results of the Elizabeth Broderick review were surprising for me, which made me reflect really on how much I was in touch with the distributed workforce. And I fully accept the fact that if Ms Broderick has said the things that she said in her report, then they must exist in the organisation. I personally didn't see that myself, and that was an aha moment for me as a senior manager. Yeah,
and this committee is no stranger to the Broderick report and why it came about, and I do always give credit where credit's due, and it's good to see Air Services Australia stepped up to the plate and doing everything they can, and good to see that you've kept an eye on that too, Mr Hood. Now, you were saying you were investigating the MPV Everest, but I'd rather flick to my colleague, Senator Brown, who has this the portfolio for shipping, shadow portfolio for shipping and all things about Tassie. How's that, Senator Brown?
Hi, Senator Brown.
Thank you, Senator.
Something like that, isn't it?
And hello, Mr Hood.
Senator Everest.
I noticed that you have put out an interim report, but the fire on the Everest that you're reporting into, that wasn't the first fire on the Everest, was it?
That's correct. There's been a number of other fires on board that vessel in the past.
Yeah. How many?
I'll just ask the Director of Transport Safety, Stuart McLeod, whose team has been looking into the MPV Everest, if he's able to answer that question for me.
Senator Stuart McLeod, Director of Transport Safety. With regards to past occurrences, the only other one that I'm aware of, other than the one you referred to, which we recently released the preliminary report on, we conducted a brief investigation into a battery fire on the same vessel, which was very much less severe than the one that occurred more recently, and in essence it was around inadequate stowage of the batteries leading to shorting and a fire, but it was readily contained to within that battery area, and that's the only other one I'm aware of involving that vessel.
When did the Everest arrive to take over from the Aurora Australis?
Senator, I'm not sure of when this was done, as much as we've got with reference to the preliminary report, which makes mention of the Antarctic Division's use of this. So,
but this was the first journey. This was their first voyage down to Antarctica?
Yeah, so what we have is it was chartered by the Australian Antarctic Division to undertake 2 voyages to Antarctic to resupply and effect personnel changes at the Australian research stations, Casey, Davis and Mawson stations, and I understand this was the second.
Right, okay, so we have a fire in, I think, February of this year.
The date, I'm not sure of the date, but yes, that's around the right time.
Right. But you've investigated that, and there's a report on that?
Correct. So that was just with regards to how we investigate. So it was, if you like, the lowest of categories in terms of ATSB investigation, and it's what we call an occurrence brief. So it was a brief review into that occurrence and really about dissemination of the facts of it and any learnings from it. But it was an investigation undertaken.
Right, and you mentioned that was essentially because the battery had been stored incorrectly. That was the finding?
So they weren't secured correctly, that's right, that's correct.
So how does that come about? The crew that was a crew error? How does it come about?
Yeah, so and again, just for context, with regards to that brief, the way they are done is largely reporting on provided information, so it's not extensive analysis that was done of it. But in essence, there were two mechanisms to secure the batteries. Both of those mechanisms were not applied to all of the batteries.
Right. And the crew of the Everest, they're all foreign crew, are they?
As I understand, yes.
Right. And do we, and I'm assuming we ensure that they have the appropriate training, safety training?
Yeah, so if I can just take it, obviously, Senator, with that investigation underway, limited in terms of detail of it, but with regards to the preliminary report we released and areas for further investigation, it is common that in terms of qualifications and training, etc., of the crew, that's an aspect that would be looked at.
So that's because the larger, more serious fire, that's still ongoing, that investigation.
It is, and I might just add that we've thrown a great deal of resources at this because this is a serious incident. Obviously, a fire such as this one on board a vessel on the Antarctic with very little room to go ashore, if you like. We've sent our finest marine investigators. We also seconded a fire expert from Air Services Australia as a subject matter expert. He deployed with the team, and we also sent 2 electronic data specialists to ensure that the information recorded from the CCTV on the ship and the voyage data recorder was appropriately secured. And we also conducted extensive interviews with the crew on board the vessel. So all of that now will enter the analysis phase, and we'll complete the investigation as soon as we could and ensure that any of those safety learnings that need to be had are published publicly.
And you hoping for that to happen before you depart, Mr Hood?
I don't think so, Senator, sadly, but certainly if the investigation ends up being more protracted than the end of the year, we'll issue an interim investigation, but yeah, certainly the team is working pretty much full time because it is a serious incident.
And have you been able to identify any shortcomings in the investigation you've done so far?
So I think, Senator, if you read the prelim report, rather than comment specifically on the findings so far, what we do is we list the areas for further investigation, and I think you'll find that the training is certainly a big focus for the investigation team.
Right, so there's issues around training. That was I know you did observe from your initial investigation that there, and you were having a look at training, experience and resourcing in terms of undertaking the Antarctic voyages. I'm just trying to get an understanding of what shortcomings you have seen. I could go back and read the report, but I'd like you to give me a brief overview now.
So certainly in a prelim report we won't be venturing into looking at the shortcomings thus far, but we'll be identifying the facts as we know them and then looking at those areas in which And I suppose if you'd like to read between the lines, those areas in which we have some concerns, and we've listed those in the report.
Okay. And how long was the fire going before they were able to extinguish it?
You got the information, Stu?
So just having a look here, Senator, it's not the actual duration I don't have to hand. I mean, the fire commenced about an hour after the fuel transfer was happening. There was a lot of automated systems that were activated. So in terms of the fighting of the fire, it happened immediately because it was, these automatic systems deployed with that. So the response was quick to that. In essence, it really involved securing and shutting down these areas and allowing that automated stuff to do its work was really, and to monitor it in terms of the temperature. But as far as specifics of it, I don't have that straight to you. But it is detailed in the preliminary report. The other aspect, just want to emphasise too, with regards to your question around areas of concern, is just to make the point that while the preliminary really details the scope, which is the areas we'll be looking at, the other key statement around that is around identification of a critical safety issue. Yeah. So the key point there, which we have, and it's common, but it's more than just words, is that if we have a critical safety issue, there'll be immediate action taken to remedy it. So while the investigation itself is proceeding and at this stage is due for completion the second quarter of next year, at any stage during the course of it, if we identify anything critical, there'll be action taken immediately to remedy it.
So where is the Everest now?
I understand the vessel was from Fremantle was to be taken to Singapore for repair. Where it actually is at the moment, I'm not sure.
And has it finished its contract in terms of being a replacement for the Aurora Australis?
And again, I'm not sure in terms of that. My understanding was that the replacement vessel was not going to be available until towards the end of this year, but I'm not sure on dates.
So the Australian Maritime Safety Authority is on after us, and they may well be able to ask some of those questions, able to answer some of those questions.
You probably should have, just kept the Aurora Australis for a bit longer.
So, rhetorical, Senator? Okay.
I
think you're asking for a personal opinion there, I think, Senator Brown.
Do you have a personal opinion on it, Minister?
I do not.
But
I can take it on notice if you like, Senator
Brown.
Brown.
It was a beloved vessel down in Hobart, the Orange Ruffy. Did its job. Had great crew, Australian crew. And now we brought in this the Everest from overseas. No Australian crew, and now we're sort of left hanging. Maybe you might want to talk, just take on notice, probably, Minister, what the government is.
That, Senator Brown, I will do, and we'll get something back to you formally.
As to how is that gap going to be filled since the Everest is out of action for how long? I'm not sure. Do you know, Mr. Hood?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. I think that is probably all I need to ask about that subject. I think I did email you about this, the fire on the Everest, and I think from what you're just telling me now, Mr. McLeod's telling me now, is that you've taken into account all those sort of safety and crewing issues when you look at the investigation.
So this is, as I said, a very serious incident, and we're taking it, throwing a great deal of resources at it with the appropriate qualifications. And as Mr. McLeod said, for example, any of those issues that we're gathering further information, examine the evidence. If they become critical safety issues, we'll notify the industry and the regulator immediately.
So when you put together your terms of reference, do you take into account views from the maritime unions? Were their views put
Senator,
forward and taken into account?
If their input is considered pertinent to the investigation, we would certainly interview members of the union, yes.
And
I'm not
Did
sure
you
whether we
in
have.
this
No,
case-
we
in
certainly
this-
interviewed a number of people in Perth. I haven't got the list of who we interviewed.
okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Hood. Thank you, Mr. McLeod.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Sorry, just checking, that was the end of your
Yeah,
question?
no, that's it for me.
Yes, terrific, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Senator. It's great to see you.
Minister.
won't be
Chair, if
going
I, on
overseas,
behalf of the
will you?
Minister and also the government, just thank Mr Hood for his service over the past 5 years. The list of achievements under your leadership that you went through was incredibly impressive, and the organisation has done an incredibly important role for our nation, as you said, on a number of, well, on how many was it?
500.
500, with 89 ongoing. Important investigations and lessons learnt to make travelling in Australia safer. Thank you also for your previous military service and everything else you did in your career. So just on behalf of the Australian Government, thank you for a life of great service and most notably in the last 5 years.
Thanks, Senator.
So you have obviously have a great team, but a great team always needs a great leader. So good luck and thank you for an incredibly productive 5 years.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Minister. Well said, and I'm sure all of the committee joins with me in endorsing those words. You'll be missed, and I hope you enjoy the next phase of your career or life.
Will he miss us, Chair?
I'm sorry?
I'm saying, will Mr Hood miss us?
Yeah. Let's not ask. Let's not
I think the
ask.
smile on his face may give you an answer. Was there?
All right, terrific. Well, with that, we'll let the ATSB go with our thanks.